that was an interesting time for the project to be done. And
Yes.
then to have those conversations in the midst of you've established the book as a conversation, and now the applicability of that book to literally a context that the book was made to address on both I think our field got a pass because it was happening on a macro level.
Yes.
That we were applying it to so rich of a discourse at the macro and meso level, but I don't think the meso and micro level of of the conversation, I don't think we really got a chance to dive in it the way we could have. And I'm talking about all of us, the author, that community of folks. Because of that, I think there was exposure. And because of that, I think we're now currently living or experiencing in the field, as well as more broadly, a little bit of that taking it back, whatever they were giving out then, taking it back and appropriating that moment back to the same old things that usually happen inside of white supremacy. But I could be wrong.
No, I would agree with you. I think, I don't work in a library anymore, so I think it's a little different for me, and I'm sort of like seeing it as an outsider in. But I don't think things have really changed at all, right? I think that there are people maybe there's more people who are interested, who were like on the cusp of maybe being interested before, and then things kind of shoved them over. But I think generally across like the field, I don't know how much has changed, right? Like we see that all the time where like first DEI was like, people didn't even really want to talk about it. And then now it's like everywhere, but it's not doing the thing that it was initially supposed to do. And I think like I started reading Elite Capture. Have you read that book? It's called Elite Capture, and I am forgetting the author's name, which is my fault. And basically, I haven't read the whole book. It's a very short one, but I just started it. It's about how like the neoliberal left will just like co-opt a thing and turn it into something that, again, well, I don't know that he says it quite this way, but like basically then just upholds the same systems that were already in place, right? And so like I think we're seeing that too, right? Where everyone's like, oh, well, now CRT is a thing, and some of us think we know what it is and we want to apply it everywhere. Like, to be honest, because I'm now working as a consultant, a lot of people do just like I think 2020, 2021, I got a lot of requests for like CRT type things, or like, how do we bring CRT into this space, whatever it may be, right? And I'm not sure, like I haven't really gotten those requests lately, but I do think, or not as many, I guess I should say. I'm like still curious how people think they're applying it. Do you know what I mean?
And I do. And to take that, maybe nudge that a little bit further. And this includes, when I say this, folks of color who don't realize they're being appropriated by so they're given a platform and they really aren't super into CRT. I don't want to say qualified, but a lot of times what I've seen, particularly, doing my own editorial work with the collective and what have you, a race conversation doesn't make it a CRT conversation.
Right.
And I think inside of the convenience and librarianship, we what do they call it? Music mashups, smash ups. We collapse a lot of stuff for, that's what categorization does. It brings some stuff together. And so CRT has a framework, it has tenets, it's amendable and editable and in a reflective manner, in a creative, in a generative manner. But that's what I was seeing a lot of. Anything, well, I was talking about race. Well, yes, but you weren't necessarily using a CRT framework, or you didn't explain yours to the degree, like, or even putting the terms critical race theory in your abstract in 2 places in your paper don't make it a CRT paper. I'm sorry, right? Other than I grade. So even though you send it as an editor, Come on now, right? Bring
Yeah.
something to it.
And I think like when we were working on the book, like that's something that I really appreciate, like Jorge. And then we had another co-editor at one point, Yolanda Jacinto, and she, wasn't able to continue with us for the rest of the book. But both of them, like they were way more on CRT than I was, right? Like I was still like a baby to CRT when we started talking about the book. And both of them were like, no, it has to be CRT, right? Like when we, like, for example, in the introduction, when we have that whole the lit review on like where CRT is intersected with LAS, it's really specific, right? It's not like, oh, not just like anytime, like we do say these are some folks who sort of like talk around it or about it or talk about race in a critical way, but not necessarily CRT, right? And like that's why we even said with the book, like this is specifically a book that's putting CRT forth, not like just critical race discussions around like LIS. Um, I think we were trying to be really careful. And I think even now, right, that informs a lot of my work. Like I don't necessarily read that much CRT right now. Like right now I'm reading other critical theory, but I wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, that's also CRT because first of all, whoever's writing it doesn't necessarily say they're using CRT and maybe they don't want to be aligned with CRT. I don't know. I'm not saying that they are, they aren't. I'm just saying it's like something else, right? And one of the things I do like about CRT is that it's like you can use CRT with other theory. It's not like just the one theory and that's it, right? That there's nothing else to it. And one of the other things that after working on the book and that I've talked about with Jorge a few times is like CRT still believes in institutions.
It does.
That the way that we're going to like reach liberation or whatever is through these institutions. And because
Particularly
I
through law, because it's
yes,
grounded in law.
exactly,
Some of
exactly.
us have moved while we engage the institutions, we are not banking our life on it.
Yes, exactly. And that's where I think for me, CRT doesn't go far enough. And so like that's why I don't necessarily I haven't just stuck with CRT is what I'm saying. Like I no longer believe that institutions are the way it's going to happen. So invested in I'm not invested in CRT in the way that I was at the beginning of the book. Not to say that I am dismissing it entirely, more that like I understand what it's useful for and what it's not.
And part of expanding, so I do something called critical race information theory, which is still emerging, right? And CRT is because people are adding to it, like racial battle fatigue was not part of it originally, right? So and that's the other thing that you can add to it. And I want to build on those lexicon. I think one of the things I always keep in my shirt pocket close to my heart is even the title. I don't always read all of it, but just the term "power to name" that Hope Olson talked about. That I got the union. I got both the union cards. I got the PhD and the accredited MLS. So now I can name. I can talk about my oppression in the field
Right.
and put a framework and use this lens. And I think part of what because I'm in a lot of institutional dynamics, it kind of forced me to want to create the collective or be with other folks who wanted to be in a collective, because I needed an external to the institution, still engaging in the work, but that had a self-expression, right? And a developmental component. But that's been my lane since the book came out. And a lot of folks I see inside of the editorial content, to your point, are really pulling, either gravitating solely to decolonization and colonial critiques, or pulling their pulling that the decolonization to their CRT work. Is one phenomenon I've seen, to your point. But since the book, you said you've gone in different direction, but since the book, that retrenchment has got more intense, right?
Yeah.
The folks who are steadfast about their justice work has gotten more intense, but the pushback inside of something, I think inside that introduction, the neo-apartheid is real.
Yeah.
How are you dealing in these tumultuous yet interesting and intriguing times?
I think I'm still figuring it out. Like, I recently moved back to New York after like 14 years away. And like some of the things I have been thinking about is like, how do I get more involved at the community level? Because I think I was so used to like being like, oh, whenever I move next, I'm not really settling down here. I'm only going to be at this place for like a few years and then I'm probably moving on. Right. So I think that mentality kind of allowed me or made me feel like I didn't always need to get that involved at the community level. So like, who knows how long I'm staying. Right. Um, Not to say that that happened in Kansas. Like I think I found community there and like worked with people there, but I think that's something I'm trying to figure out for myself. Like for example, I'm really heavily influenced now by emergent strategy, which is like Adrienne Murray Brown, who's really heavily influenced by Grace Lee Boggs and Octavia Butler, and the work of like, oh, the one of the principles is small is good, small is all, right? That the things that we do on a really like micro local level have the capacity to then ripple out in these bigger ways and impact things in larger ways that maybe we don't foresee at the beginning.